Okay, so back up with hard cam. I'm gonna try a little bit of what I did previously in the other videos, try some new things. Yeah, we're gonna talk about a god today. We actually have time to do that instead of focusing on things that are very pivotal to the story that we're at right now. So we're gonna talk about one of the gods we haven't really discussed at all, and that's Sha, goddess of the wilds. So Sha is goddess of all beasts, forests, rivers, the wind, and the belly of the earth itself. She is the very soul of Hyperion itself and the direct descendant of Gaia Mia. So she's directly tied to the material plane itself in a very, very, very strong way. So she goes by many names such as Breath of the World, Spirit of the Wild, Mother of Many, Mother of Beasts, and Daughter of Hyperion. So she's a very wide encompassing names, and those all have to do with her backstory, which we're getting into, and it all kind of makes sense once you really dig into it. So she is the fourth god at the table of five. So she sits behind Soul, Ledger, and the Raven Queen. So very, very, very powerful goddess. Has a lot of followers and has a lot of spirit power, if you will, or god power, if you will, based off of her domains that she possesses. So the Church of Sha teaches that with the death of Gaia Mia, that Sha actually lay dormant within the earth for countless centuries until other gods had actually already emerged and started to make their way across the material plane. This still was very, very, very few gods, and when she did emerge, she actually wed one of those first gods, whose name was Anim, the All-Father of Giants. And they wed, and she birthed 6 children for Anum. So you had Grealantor, who became the father of the Hill Giants, Scoreus Stonebone, who ended up being the father of the Stone Giants, Suitor, who's the father of all the Fire Giants, Memnor, the father of all Cloud Giants, Thrym, the god of all Frost Giants, and then finally Stronimus, the father of all Cloud Giants. So, big happy family for many, many centuries, and with Anum and Sha at the helm and overlooking their children, they actually oversaw the first great war of Hyperion. This was a war between the giants and the aboleths. This is called the War Before Time. And with the collapse of the control of the aboleths, because remember at this time there weren't really trees or forests or anything like that around, the world was very dark and a desolate place. And the aboleths essentially just ruled over all this mindless matter that existed out at this particular point in time. And once the giants overtook the aboleths, Sha rewarded her children in very different ways. So for Grealantor, she created the forests and the hills for his children to live in. For Stronimus and the Cloud Giants, she created the oceans and the rivers themselves. For Thrym and his children, she created the snowy peaks and the Great White Divide down the center of the earth itself. For the Stone Giants, she created quarries and materials for them to mine throughout the world. Before, it was all just one kind of just gray matter that went through the entire world. There was no like structure, there were no ore or anything like that. So she carved out all of that into the world and allowed them to create these things, or to mine these things so that they can create the structure that they do. For the Fire Giants, she brought up from the core of the earth the fleeting, dying heat of their mother Gaia Mia and brought that to the surface in the form of volcanoes and lakes of fire for the Fire Giants. And for the Cloud Giants, she created the peaks of mountains for them to live upon, and the clouds themselves that many Cloud Giants live in. So all these things she created for her children because of how proud she was of them. And with her husband Anum, they oversaw an empire that lasted for 100,000 years. And upon the time of the Giants' empire's collapse to the dragons, Sha for many reasons. It had also to do with the fact that Anam took a new lover that Sha was not particularly happy with, an individual named Tiamat, who we'll be getting into. Sha abandoned her children and left her husband and went off into the wilds of the world that she had created, and abandoned the empire as it fell into ruins. So Sha took the form of a wolf and began to run amongst all the creations that she made for her children, primarily for the hill giants, and she began to hunt the prey that her children were accustomed to eating. And she did this somewhat as a punishment to them. She tried to rid the world of these creatures that she had created for her children as a sick punishment. But one day when she was running, she came across a great white stag, and she was entranced by this stag. It was something different. She could tell that it was a new being. It was a stag for sure, but she had not created the stag. So Sha chased the stag, attempting to kill it. She wanted to bring it back to her den of children and feed it to them. And she chased for days and days and days and could not catch the stag, until one point where they were actually separated by a chasm. Sha called out to the stag and asked, "Who are you?" So when Sha spoke to the stag, he responded with a simple phrase saying, "Catch me by the next full moon and I will give you my name and my life. However, if I evade you until the next full moon, then you must agree to be my wife." So Sha chased him for a full moon, could not catch him, and upon the full moon, he revealed himself to be a new being that came to be known as the Seldrine. And Sha kept to her word. She changed her form back to her godly form and took this young god as her husband. Now, this Seldrine's name is Corellon Lorathian. He is known as the Allfather of the Elves. So it's an important distinction to make that Sha did not become the mother of the elves. She became the mother of the Seldrine, who are the pantheon, the gods of the elves themselves. So she gave birth to them, and then through another series of events that we'll get into in another video, the elves came into existence. And Sha, along with Corellon and the other elven deities, ruled over the elven empire that was starting to rise at this point. And the elves needed a home. And through a deal that Corellon claimed of this territory without exception, at this point Anam had been banished to the Upside Down. And so, Corellon asked his wife, "Where should we put our children when I go to the council to determine where everyone is going to live?" And she says, "Take it from the hill giants. Take the forests for our new children." And for whatever particular reason she had hatred for the hill giants, it just stuck. Maybe it's because Gerlantra was the dumbest of all of them. But she said to take them from the hill giants, and so eventually the elves were given that territory and they drove the hill giants out. So hill giants will continuously try and live within the forest because it is their ancestral home, but elves have a particular hatred for hill giants as they are seen as the first and imperfect children of their mother. They were together for millions of years, and after the Great Blue Death, a new Seldrine came named Arishmi. So Arishmi, she stole away Corellon's heart, and Corellon threw Sha away and basically turned her away and said, "I am taking a new queen. You go stand and serve along with the rest of your children as I take this new beautiful bride." So Sha was not okay with that. She was heartbroken. Her children tried to console her, but she at this point turned her back on them. So Sha leaves the Seldrine court and she walks the face of the earth for countless years until eventually she comes face to face with Luna, goddess of the moon. They fall madly in love. They decide to get married, and as a wedding gift to her new lover, Sha relinquishes her dominion over the sea to Luna. And this is where the moon has influence over the tides of Hyperion, and that's one important astronomical effect, that the tides are only affected by Luna, not Seluna. So that's one thing you may come up in the game, may not, but it's just an important little tidbit to know, that tides are only affected by Luna, not Seluna. So they get married. They end up having a child, Suna. She is the goddess of pleasure, passion, love, song, and butterflies. She's a redheaded, beautiful woman who frolics around the world and lives on the moon Luna itself. So right around when this is all happening, though, there's some trouble with Corellon. He ends up being betrayed by his new wife, Arishmi. She shows her true intentions, that she was never interested in Corellon himself. She was always just more interested in power, and she reveals herself to be Lulth and takes away a large faction of the elves for herself, and these become the Drow. Now, while this civil war is happening, Corellon, he's attempting to throw Lulth into the abyss, which he does, but in the process is mortally wounded by Lulth. And so he is, he's on his deathbed, and the Seldra'in, they are unable to save him at this point, and they call out in desperate help. One of the Seldra'in, Cheyenne and Moonbow, comes, and Cheyenne has always been very close with Sha. She's kind of a lovable character. No one can really not get along with her. She's just one of those individuals, and begs Sha to come and save Corellon because they simply cannot. So she reluctantly comes, and she sees the love that all the Seldra'in have for Corellon, and particularly two of her daughters, Adria Fenya and Hanali Evershroud. Her two daughters, they're there, and Sha has an idea. She infuses both of her daughters along with Cheyenne Moonbow. They end up forming a new goddess, Tyandrius, and she is able to, with the three goddesses combined and Sha empowering them, they are able to put Corellon into this dream state that allows him to not perish due to his mortal wounds that he has, and in the hopes that they will be able to eventually save him. Now, one thing that's important to note here is that unlike Forgotten Realms lore, in Shards of Hyperion, when a god dies, they are gone. There is no way to revive them. With mortals, when you die, you have a soul that goes on. Even when you kill the soul, there's ways for the soul to come back sometimes in very weird circumstances. I mean, almost everything has another life that extends on into immortality. Gods don't. That's actually one of the very key factors that they have to wrestle with when they want to become gods. They actually have to understand the fact that their life now is finite. They're biologically immortal, but they will eventually die. So when they're killed. So they put Corellon into this vegetated state, this dream state. And with this, they end up creating the world of Faria. And that's another video that we can go on to there, but more or less, Sha at that point decides my entire existence has been defined by other people, by my lovers. And even though she and Luna were madly in love, they were very happy together, Sha realized she needed to be alone. So she left. She left Luna, she left her daughter, left the moon, and went to the World Tree. And that is where she established, she found the Green Isles, which had some gods that were living there, some minor deities, but she came in there and really made it her own, and that is where she spends her time now. And that's where she spends time nurturing her true children, is what she sees them as the beasts of the world that she has created, both the beasts of the land and the sea and the air. So Sha, her church, they are truly dedicated to the preservation of Hyperion, the wilderness, and everything with that. She is a big fan of people who harness the wilderness for the greater good. So she's really into farmers and people who train animals and those sorts of folks. So she's totally about foragers and farmers and people who are trying to collect food for the greater good, because taking care of people is a very good act, and she is all about that. So that is one of the things that her church definitely promotes. She is not a fan of cities. She is not a fan of big temples and items like that. All of her temples are within natural structures. They do not influence or damage any of these surrounding areas that they take place in. So groves and temples of her church are actually made out of like living vines that have been manipulated over time to form the shapes that the worshipers need for their temples themselves. So she's very much into doing no damage to the environment itself, and that's what her people preach. Obviously, this is going to lead her to be pretty much the patron deity of druids and rangers, these two individuals. It'd be very rare if they don't at least revere her. They don't necessarily need to worship her outright as their primary god, but they definitely will almost all revere her to some extent. She is very anti gnomes, especially due to their technological advances that they have, and dwarves. She has a big issue with dwarves, which has to do a lot with their similar tinkering to gnomes. And there's also some backstory stuff that we didn't have time to go into here, that she had some issues with Moradin in the past. She's also really not a fan of the humans that have popped up in the world in the last 1,000 years. So she's really has an eye on them. So it's very rare that, I mean, she does have human druids that are in her church, but it's very common it's very hard for them to rise up high in the church itself because of these issues that she has with them. But more or less, if you're taking care of the environment, you're not being a dick to a bunch of animals, and you're not building a whole bunch of structures that are destroying the landscape, she is totally cool with you. If you're not, then, I mean, who knows, maybe a tornado will come and knock down your city. So, I think that's about it. If you have any questions, of course, ask either Discord or YouTube, text. If you're new here and you managed to make it through here, cool. Welcome to stay and ask questions as well if you found this particular god interesting, and if it's something you want to use in your own homebrew campaign, go for it. Let's just have fun, D&D. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got, and I'm gonna get this thing up there, and I'll talk to you guys later.